The next thing we are going to talk about is Ruby, the object-oriented language. And this thing is very generic. It's not specific to Java, Ruby, but embrace polymorphism. And
we have a time check. Yeah, we're almost done actually.
Yeah. So embrace polymorphism. What do you mean by embrace polymorphism? How many have written code like this? In the application helper of Rails or wherever, whatever, you write a method called total score, which does if test is English test or subjective score, else if test is a math test or total marks.
You will ask one question. Return code code test dot state equals string literal xyz. It's a flag passed. Sorry, this is better. This is better.
Written this code, written this was similar, like worse than that. This code.
Guilty.
Yeah, guilty, right? Now this the duck typing is a subset, but you don't need duck typing here actually. What you
this
need
is generic across any object-oriented language.
So what you need is basically you need a class. You should have a common method called total score, English test, math test, and given a test object, you should be able to say this is dot total score.
Like so, literally the only difference from this to Java or C# is you would have to add one more interface on top of it. If you'll notice, we don't have an interface there. This ties back to what we were just talking about.
And this is so important, you know, like I think if one thing you guys need to take away from today's topic is this: embrace polymorphism. Like and
no if checks. Flip that around. All ifs generally look at with great suspicion. The branch is the worst enemy of good object-oriented programming. Okay, branches are for parsing. If you have input from the outside world, text, mouse clicks, whatever, use if checks. Once the parsing is done, any if check should be looked at with enormous suspicion.
Okay. So yeah, no, not that dumb. Really, I don't make that mistake. And in fact, to be honest, sometimes when you look at a large piece of code, like you have like 500 lines of model code and 500 lines of your controller, you will be hard pressed to think how to make it polymorphic. In which case, if you have that doubt, I will suggest this. Maybe if you are a newbie, send that code to Bangalore run mailing list so that we can figure it out. Less politics on Bangalore run, more code is always welcome. Okay, so if you send that code, I think there will be people who will be able to read it and tell you how can you make it more polymorphic. People don't ask that questions. I just so bad. So it'll be hard in a large code base to figure out, because I have been through and I know that as a newbie it's hard to figure out how to make this polymorphic. In that case, ask help.
But if you're doing greenfield, like you don't have to change existing code. It's a simple rule. Justify like mad any if check. Like that's how I learned. Like I started my career professionally programming as a pair programmer, and I had to do that. Like when I was pairing with a more senior person, any if I wrote, I had to justify down to the last beat why that was there. And you'll be surprised. Like slowly you'll realize that ifs are basically like go-tos. Right? I mean, all the people who started with basic here way back, eventually you got to a point where you realize, hey, there are no go-tos in my software. I'm writing perfectly good software without a go-to. It's the same thing. You write perfectly good software without ifs.
Scheme doesn't have
to start with you say
sure. Yeah, so
Smalltalk doesn't have website.
Yeah, it doesn't have branches in this sense at all. But I mean, it's a more detailed conversation. I guess I can take it offline or we can talk later or whatever.
I think fundamentally programming is all about creating structures, abstracting concepts into objects and classes and things like that. The moment you start using if and ifs, sometimes you are missing some of the underlying concepts.
Actually, there's one, I mean, given the time constraint, there is just one simple mechanic that I can give you. Your interpreter or your compiler, whatever language you has, is one fundamental if check. So if you just go back, this if check is done for you in your interpreter or your compiler, right? If you do polymorphic type dispatch, this is basically what your compiler is doing internally. It's not doing rocket science, right? The simple rule is, if there is a feature offered to you by the language, do not re-implement it in your own terms in code, right? Simple rule. The language gives it to you as a built-in feature in some form. Do not re-implement it yourself.
So one resistance generally when you will come across when you will try to embrace polymorphism is, see, the method subjective score and these methods are different. They have different name. How can I call them the same name? Sometimes another argument that you will get is these two methods are entirely different. They accept different arguments. But you need to step back and see if you can refactor these two methods to have same interface actually. And that is where you will be truly understanding the power of polymorphism.
Write it first and then just fallback, justify, probably you will end up doing return.
Yeah. Okay. So now I'm not done. Okay. Next thing I'm going to talk about is hashes. Any Ruby programmer, new Ruby programmer when they start, they encounter hashes. And wow, that's nice. Everywhere hashes, all over. Hashes everywhere. Methods return hashes, methods take hashes, just hashes.
How do you get my engineering scores?
Yeah. Use, but don't abuse hashes. Hashes are great. Now I'll show you what is abuse of hash. I was writing a pirate-based scrapper because it's going to go down by so I save it before it goes down locally on the hard drive. And I have this hash that stores the scrap output, and I'm checking if title is there, then response to title, otherwise pirates true, and then body I'm storing it and returning that hash the hash as a result of this. Eventually, but what will happen that when I get the response of the scrapper response, I will need to perform more logic on that response body. I will need to check for links, what links are there, which links are torrent links. I will need to do all that logic. It won't be this simple. And in that case, storing that in a hash will become bad. So like let's say, this code is there, and this logic, even right now, when it is not so complicated, there is a small check, response.type, there is a question mark check, which should warn you that maybe hash is not the right object to do it. Use a class. Define a class called scrap output and store and pass the full response body and delegate this whole thing where you're storing this extracting title or body into that class.
So the fundamental underlying principle is name everything. Right? If you talk about your code in English, you will see that in your sentence there are certain names. Those names should show up in the code. It's as simple as that. If you say, I am going to scrape Pirate Bay to get scraped output, there is a reasonable probability that those key names in that sentence will show up in your code, and they should. Right? And this is the 80-20 rule. Not everything will show up, but most things should show up.
So the problem with a method that accepts hashes and returns hashes, how many here who is using Rails remember the syntax of those link to or found to labels? Anybody remembers the syntax? Remember it, my God, I can never remember it.
Yesterday I remembered.
Yes, I was.
You can never reasonably remember it without basically looking at the documentation each time. So you can understand that is a bad idea. So let's not make same mistakes that we just made. Okay. So yeah. But one argument that you will see, oh my God, like performance, I'm creating so many objects, and performance, and there's so many garbage collectors, garbage that you're going to get busy, And what's wrong with hashes? These are I have argued with the guy with 3 year, 4 year experience, like for half an hour, 1 hour, where I asked him to replace that hash with a proper class. He's like, no, it will create performance, you should add to benchmark or so on. It's not that good. The thing is, Ruby interpreter is getting better. It used to interpret the code in 1.9, now it has a bytecode interpreter. So it's not exactly walking you to HTML now. The garbage collector is getting better. In fact, I will say, if first write the best code that is possible and then try to optimize it. Okay?
And quite frankly, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm not sure if I'm missing some optimization around hashes, but if you use hashes versus classes, you have one extra object, which is the class.
Yeah.
Really, that's all you're optimizing for.
Class is anyway going to store your instance variable in a hash. So
you have one more object, which is the class itself, and that's it. It's not like there are thousands of objects getting created.
So perceive it to be too heavy in a class. It's a mindset.
It's like
So I actually have a small rant about that in like 2 slides down. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I have talked to this like couple of programmers. It's like it's where I have to shout and whatnot. Okay, so next thing is know thy data structures. People when they encounter hash and arrays, they just keep using hash and arrays till the end of the day actually. Know that there is a thing called set. There is a thing called sorted set. For example, I have seen this code countless times. Create apple, orange, apple, and then fruits.unique. Fetch a set of active record objects called .unique. Better you should, when you need a unique records, use it. This is again nothing specific to Ruby. Set.new fruits.unique. It will automatically, for both the cases, the output Apple or any non-unique output will be removed. Especially true for Java programmers as well, because Ruby programmers are probably much worse than Java programmers in this case. They don't use the proper data structure that we should use. So understand that, read the standard library and try to use the proper data structure. If you move away from Ruby and start using set for proper types, then today coming here is worthwhile actually. In my opinion actually, where you need it. Okay? Any questions on this one? Set is nothing but whenever you add, it automatically computes hash of each object that you add and checks if it's already there. But the optimization is optimized to store unique data structures actually. Unique objects, unlike the array. Performance will be much better in that.